Good afternoon. I welcome you to the historic Scarritt Bennett Wightman Chapel for this service of remembrance and learning and pondering. We are privileged to have Mary T. Newman here to speak to us. She's raised 5 children, has 5 grands and 1 more on the way, and has 2 great-grands. Lives in the country and pretty much self-sufficient with her farm and garden. She's a traditional potter, teaching the old native ways of making pottery and firing with wood on the ground. Clay, she says, is her sanity. She travels to Native American festivals to teach. She's worked in Native American ministries for many years, since 1995. She's currently the chair of the CONAM, Committee on Native American Ministries, and she serves on the board of the Southeastern Jurisdictional Association of Native American Ministries, the chair of the Southeastern Caucus and the International Caucus and Native American Ministries. She's the executive. She is on the executive committee for the NACP, Native American Comprehensive Plan. Those of you who are United Methodists will know that program. And on the board of directors of the General Board of Global Ministries, serving in the jurisdiction level. And then she also is on part of the Women's Program Advisory Group, Bylaws and Legislation. Native American Ministries is her passion, as you can tell. She attends Jordania United Methodist Church, is the chair of the board, works with children, and teaches Sunday school. Whew. For those who are present, I want to call your attention, and I imagine Mary T. will be mentioning this. The September 30th is a day of remembrance, was a day of remembrance for the children who were part of the displacement, I'll use a nice word, but of boarding schools for many, many years. There is a commission that has been formed, Truth and Healing Commission, on the Indian boarding schools, and they're working on policies to find, trace where many of the children are and what happened in that. And as part of the remembrance, there's these little birds that are here that are symbol and sign of a child's spirit. So please feel free at the back, or you can pick one up at the altar as you get ready to leave. And there's more information at the back, and also information about the missing Indigenous women, Strong Hearts. Lots of work to be done. Let's take a moment just to pause and invite Spirit into our hearts, into this space. Hear now the call to worship. And I have a response on here, so please respond. Our God and Creator asks, how will you live the life I have given you? Our God and Creator asks, how will you walk this path I have given to you? Our God and Creator asks, how will you reach out to the world beyond yourselves? With me, help us to remember we are all connected through the endless circle of life and creation. Teach us to trust and to follow the example of Jesus Christ, who lived a life of sacrifice, walked a path of goodness and mercy, and reached beyond human differences. Amen. May we pray. Creator God, as you have gathered us in generations past, lead and guide us this day. As we seek your wisdom and your vision for our people, give us eyes to see one another as you see us. People of one God, it's who we are, connected to one another and to you in all our relations. And in your Son, Jesus. Give us ears to hear the wisdom of our elders and the laughter of our children. Give us words of blessing and healing for a hurting world. Open our hearts and lead us on the path of peace. We stand together on sacred ground with grateful hearts, knowing the one who promises is ever faithful and true. Amen. Amen.
I always read the verse before and after. And so Acts 17:26, I use a lot, but I will go above that from Acts 17:24. And I apologize, I should have just written in a nutshell about me, because that sounds like I do a lot, and I'm like, that makes me tired to hear it. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortal life and breath and all things. 26. From one ancestor he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said. I thank you for this invitation. This is what we're talking about today is a deep subject, and it's not one of those that you can just say in just a few words. It's more of something that we broach and we have to follow up with for us to realize that it's deep. I have worked in Native ministry since '95. Started on the district level, and as it escalated, I had to keep growing in my own knowledge. And I can say I cannot speak for all Native people. I can speak for myself, and my background is Cherokee, and my background as a family who was on the Trail of Tears. I have learned so much serving in the positions that I have been listed on, and have met many people from different tribes, which is a tremendous blessing. If you look at the removal that we had in the Southeast, you have to realize that a lot of people didn't leave, and there are a lot of people in the Southeast who are as much Native as people who are in Oklahoma. And that can cause some dissension even within the Native world. And so when we look at what is happening in our Native world today, we look at one of the things that broke in the news 2 or 3 months ago in Canada. And friends of mine, Debbie, Jennifer, and Marcy, sisters, Their mother and their aunties were all in Kamloops boarding school on the reserve in Kamloops. It's called a reserve in Canada, and they're called First Nations people. Here it's a reservation and Native Americans. When that broke, it was very hard for Debbie to speak about it when we had a meeting or in front of a group, because it was so close to her heart. And so many people, as I told Donna, so many people said, oh, when are we going to talk about this for what happened in the United States? What we would call the lower 48 if you weren't looking at Alaska. And I said, as the shirt says, there were already over 6,000 children found under houses and schools and et cetera in the lower 48 before that ever came out. But it's, as I said, Native news is not world news. It makes it very hard to hear the stories of heartbreak from the folks that are directly affected by this. I'm affected by it just because of my relationship in my native world and my friends and families, but it didn't happen directly to me, but my heart grieves with those families. If you look at Carlisle, they are now working on being able to reclaim bodies to take back for burials. But they're finding the wrong body in the wrong place, which happens today in regular cemeteries, that the plats aren't correct. But part of their cemetery was moved for sports fields. And so people come to do ceremony, and they have to do DNA testing, et cetera, to make this correct, and find at the removal time that that's not the person that's there. And that's heartbreak. And it's heartbreak when they go back home with the remains for ceremony and reburial. We don't want to think of how human beings have treated human beings, but I would say that we go back biblically, and greed will do that. And you can use words like manifest destiny, you can use the new words like doctrine of discovery, but you also have to go back to what causes people to do what they do. And a lot of times when I speak, I'll say, creation became migration. That's how I see it. That may be how people want to explain that all Native people came across the Bering Strait and ended up across America. And I would say partially that's true for some, but not all. There's nothing in the Southeast that references music or art or anything with Mongolians or someone from Asia. So one theory is came up from South America. But the theory is right here in Acts 17:26, God put everyone where he wanted them to be, whether it was through migration, whether it was from any other way that it happened, he put them there. In the Southeast, pottery is over 5,000 years old. So that's some thought process to how long someone has been in one spot enough to dig clay up, make something, improve it, because the first pottery was not really any good, and they improved it to move inland, and it went across the United States as a viable product to use. I love working in clay, and my new thing that I tell children is, this clay is as old as the earth. Just think on that. When I pick it up, I go, this was dug out of creation. It wasn't from the store. It's from the ground, and it's as old as creation. And that floors me every time I tell children that. And they have no concept of how old the earth is or creation, so I have to share that with them. What are we going to do today? And we can delve into the past, we can delve into the tragedies, and we can delve into how it relates to people that it affected directly. We also have to say, what can we do for the future? In the Native world, it's 7 generations. We look at how do we look at our families for 7 generations ahead, not just for today or tomorrow. And that's a powerful responsibility to have, to know that you're working toward the future. Here at Scarritt, you're working toward the future. You're not wanting it to be a stagnant place. You're wanting a future. And so we look at how is the church involved in that? How can we say that it's God hierarchy to the church, to the open door, to the community? And if you know anything about Native, We are community. We are not one. We are community. A man he wanted to write a book about Chief Joseph, very famous Nez Perce. Lots of quotes that are carved into everything that you can buy about him. And everywhere he went in their communities, they would turn their back. And that he was like, what's going on? And so he finally got to one community in the area, and a man said to him, I applaud what you want to do, and we admire Chief Joseph as our own tribal people. But he's only one person, and we are community. And if we think about ourselves as community today, and we use the phrase open doors, open hearts, open minds, et cetera, then we have to go, how open are they? How open is our mind to these things that are boggling our minds right now? We have women epidemic who are disappearing off of tribal lands. Human trafficking, yes. Just simply rape and murder, yes. The hands are tied in some ways. The FBI can only investigate a murder, but hands are tied if they can't say it's a murder. There's no body. Tribes are looking for their own women, dredging their own rivers, walking their own lands, trying to find women and the girls. And so there's your heartbreak. And where are we with that? We can write resolutions. We can stand up and disavow the doctrine of discovery. But until we actually go out and say we are a part of finding these women, we are a part of looking for them, then we're not in community with the people that are doing that. At our recent event that we have in the conference, Native Moccasins Rock, and I think Donna got to come for the first time, and I'm hoping you were blessed by that. We made these little women, and on the back were names of women that are still missing. And it can be males. There are males missing. And so you can be a part of that by looking on Facebook and joining the group that posts pictures and information that may seem like, oh no, they're from all out west, but they may be here. Tennessee used to be number 1, and I think it's fallen to number 3 for human trafficking, I guess because of the interstate system. Nothing to brag about, that's for sure. But, just putting that out there to say, here's a face, a name and a face, and these people need to be found. Where are we with the missing children that are being found? Don Coyas is the head of White Bison. They have a everyday meditation that you can read online. He went to his grandfather, and Don worked with NASA, as my uncle and my cousin did. And he was an engineer, and every day he would go see his grandfather, and he would take his day planner thing, and he would open it, and he'd go, when can we talk about the boarding schools? And his grandfather would just say, not now. And he'd come back with his day planner, and he'd say, I want to pencil it in. When can we talk about the boarding schools? And his grandfather said, when you put that book down, we'll talk about the boarding schools. And his grandfather finally sat down with him and told him, they took us all into the basement, what we would consider a basement. There was a roaring furnace. There was a burlap bag that was moving on the floor. We had already been doused with powder for lice. And the man was giving all these instructions, all the rules. And he said, and if you break these rules, this is what happens to you. And he took the burlap bag, which was full of kittens, and threw it into the furnace. Hitler studied all of that. And that's how a lot of the things that people read about Hitler are familiar to things that happened in our world here. My friend Winnie, who lives in California, has the most beautiful spirit about her. I can see her laughing right now. She bears a tattoo on her arm with the boarding school where she did tattoos. So when we had the man that after World War II who had done the internment camps for the government, it wasn't just Japanese Americans. They had Italians and Germans and Native Americans. Alaskans were put into 3 years, the men into camps. They said for their safety, even though they were saying, we will not let the Russians come on our land. Now think about what year they became a state. So the recovery period for that, the man said, I've got a solution to get rid of the reservations. And he said, if we take them all and put them in buses and drop them off in large cities like LA and Detroit, Cleveland, large cities, San Francisco, we can empty the reservations of these Indians. Goes back to the old get rid of the Indian. And many people did. They promised them jobs. Many people got on those buses and went. They lost their culture. They lost their language. They lost their music. They lost their souls. And they started meeting again in community centers and drumming together. The drum is your heartbeat. And talking. What are we going to do? We are Indian, which to us is not a bad term. It's only when it's used in a bad way. Native American became the politically correct term. American Indian is on our cards. And so many people started to return. And Wilma Mankiller went back to Mankiller Flats in Oklahoma, became a social worker, and became the chief of the Western Nation of Cherokee in Oklahoma. Her husband went to church. She prayed traditionally. She was in a wreck. Her best friend hit her head on. Her best friend died. She was in a coma. And when she woke up, she said, I understand what you're saying about God now. He came to me in my sleep. But I'll still pray traditionally, but I'll go to church with my husband and pray more because there cannot be too many prayers. And when we think of that, we go, is it just our prayer life? Is that going to do it? And it's not. Our prayer life is our fax machine to God to say, we got to do something. We can talk to the government, but we ourselves, each individual person, our prayer life is to direct it to saying, God, what can I do? That doesn't sound like something you can each individual do, but as more people gather together do it, you can do something. And we have things happening in Tennessee. There's 55,000 Native people in the state of Tennessee. Only about 30,000 of those are what people call full blood, which I don't like that term, but people use it. And how can we say the church is going to work with those folks? And I have quandaries with that because we don't get recognized for working in that way, even though as our committee, and our committee is probably the second most active committee in our conference. And so I would say we know where R1 is, and the church is not tapping into that. Do we stop? No, we don't, and we're persistent. And as you read on here, the things I do, I've been very blessed by that because it does give me a voice, and you can also have a voice. And I know that Scarritt can have a voice, and I know Nashville can have a voice. So we keep trying to say, what are we going to do? I wrote Matt Lauer after the Twisted Sister hurricanes, Katrina and Rita. That's what we call them, the Twisted Sisters. And I said to Matt Lauer, I said, sir, I understand that you're lifting up the Vietnamese fishermen in this area, but how about the Homa and the Chitimacha and the Choctaw, the folks that are native that were affected by this? And, Matt didn't write me back. And I thought, that's why we still have to say it. He might not write me back, but I still said it. And as we speak up, as we have a collective voice to say, what are we going to do? Are we going to go back to the great list that Donna put together of the boarding schools, to the denominations that have the boarding schools? Do we go back to them and say, when are you going to speak up? Recently, the Queen of England died, and there was controversy there with the people from different lands where they had been enslaved by England. And they were like, we're sorry she died, but we're not going to lift up the monarchy, And so you have that kind of thing to look at. But you also have your own voice to say, why do I care? We had conversation a while ago about being born in Alabama. I lost my tonsils in Alabama. I was on the state line in Tennessee, and our hospital was the clinic above the newspaper office. So you had to go into Alabama to have a baby, and they hadn't built a hospital by the time I took my tonsils out, so went back to Alabama for that. But I have a great desire to talk to people in my area where I grew up and where you grew up. Were you affected by any of the things that happened in America, in what we term America? Red Man's Land, which became known as Oklahoma, has 39 federally recognized tribes there, and they don't all get along before they got pushed together. We all had our travels. From Genesis to the end, we've all had our travels. The walks to Oklahoma, the Navajo had Bosque Redondo, 300 miles, but is that any different than Exodus? Are we going to be Moses so that we may not see the results? Probably so. As one of my pastors says, I plant a seed, I may not see the bloom. But if we keep working, if we keep saying there's something we can do, then we can stand up and say, I did what I was supposed to do, and God, I hope you're pleased. I joke a lot with God, and I'm hoping he's got a good sense of humor. If you get there after I do, just say, where's Mary T? And he'll say, she's on the back 40 because I can't shut her up. And my dear friend Jimmy Yellowhorse, my middle name is Thornton. It's a family name. And to not lose it, we give it to somebody in the family. And my dad was a Thornton, and so my middle name's Thornton. And in school, I became Mary T because you don't want to get called Thornton when you're a little girl in school. But one of my sons has Thornton. We keep adding something to save ourselves so that the future generations 7 ahead will know who we were, the steps that we took. 11,000 Cherokee walked through Nashville and crossed that bridge that's been torn down. Native people found the bridge abutments. The Library of Congress came about 8 years ago and took pictures of all of it. And that bridge was torn down because the steamboat stacks got too tall and they were losing traffic. The entrepreneur that owned the bridge company also was the man who went to Memphis to sign the treaty to cede territory from the Chickasaw. A real capitalist, if you would say. So, but we have to share those facts for you to know that 11,000 footsteps came through here. And during annual conference, they said, what can we do? And it was stated, we can spend our money somewhere else. Even though people were given food and clothing along the way. That didn't go well. And at 2016 in Tampa, when we call him Tink, Tinker, a Lutheran theologian who spoke, gave that fact. Someone called the conference office where I was employed at one time and said, I heard this at general conference, and I just can't believe that's true. And I said, oh, that sounds so white. And then I thought, oh, they're going to fire me because I really stepped out there. But it is. And so then we get into the realm of white privilege. We have to overcome a lot of things. But if we work together collectively, if we share these facts about boarding schools, if we share these facts about missing people, if we share these facts about what we can do to repair the hurt, what can we do to go forward in our 7 generations? You all are of an age that you still are able to look at future generations. So I ask you to think about what God said. I put you where you were supposed to be. You're here today where you were supposed to be. Where I grew up, that's where I was supposed to be. My family that out of 11 children split and went different ways with the removal. Some came back and some stayed. But they are where they're supposed to be today. And so I ask you to study what was given out today. Think about what you can do. You may think there's nothing I can do, but give me a call or text or email, and my voicemail is always full, but text or email and say, what can we do? And I'm sure that we can put feet to the ground and a voice that can be heard, that here today we can do something. And we can also pray for those that are hurt. My friend Debbie and Jennifer and Marcy, a lady at our event in the prayer circle at the closing said, I was just wounded at boarding school, and she was very bitter. And we said to her later privately, if you don't let go of the bitterness, you're never going to be healthy. You're never going to be able to grow in your own spirit. And she took that well, I think. She didn't realize that there were other people there that were like her. And the boarding schools today, some of them are doing good. And I have friends who said, I went to boarding school and I'm glad because I did get an education. But those weren't always wasn't always the way it was. We had pork barrel spending in this country. They created an insane asylum for Native Americans at the border of the Dakotas. And now today it's a marker in a golf course. Over 100 people are listed as dead, but it was a horrible thing. And those people have people alive today. So as Don Coya says, when this is a native thing, I promise you. When you're walking and you just kind of nod at each other, and the native person knows the native person, it's kind of hard for you maybe to understand. And but it's just a nod. You recognize each other. But as your world expands into the native world, you'll be able to nod, and they're going to go, "Oh, I know Jim. I met him at the powwow." I nod to Jim. Those kinds of things where then you are a part of community and not just holding yourself as one. So I thank you today for this time. I do believe creation was our migration. Excuse me. And I think that if we look at that migration, we know that God still wanted us there where that migration became, but not a forced migration. So we may be Moses. I may be Moses. But I know that while I've been walking on that path, that I've seen some of that future. So I thank you so much. In closing, I have a prayer that was written by a good friend of mine, and it is called Great God. And I apologize, my Cherokee is not fluent. Whenever they would call me from the conference, the first time they called me, they said, before I was employed, they said, "Oh, we want you to come to annual conference and you can wear your traditional clothes." And I said, "Man, they're going to let me wear tie-dye and shorts at annual conference." And they like, no, we want beads and feathers in your hair. And I said, "I don't wear beads and feather in my hair." And traditionally, women put their hair down for worship. And so I wouldn't have had it braided and beads and feathers. But we got past that. It was I loved being able to say that. But then as that progressed of us having an impact with annual conference, we keep trying to do that. It's hard work. You all know that. So in closing, this is my prayer to the great God. Una klana hataganika gahu usti chanili nugasana udoda stistala sigoliga iga. And the translation is, "You have come to listen. You never fail at anything. Our Father, help me, forgive me." Thank you so much.